Hello! Today we'll be creating a mixed media Frida Kahlo themed art charm necklace in 5 easy steps. The materials we'll be using are art charms themselves. I'll tell you more about those in a minute. Some extra beads, beading wire, and then a clasp. Along with the clasp, you'll need some crimp beads or crimp tubes, and I'll be using some crimp covers.
Thanks for subscribing to Creative Solace Studios and checking out the mixed media fun.
Tools will be jewelry pliers, crimp tools, and wire cutter. So let's get started by moving this out of the way. I have had these gorgeous Frida Kahlo art charms in my possession for about 15 years in my art drawer, and I have decided to finally make a project with them. I've got a couple other art charm tours that you can watch. This is the style that we're going for, a chunky charm necklace. Here's a bracelet. These two are with a Halloween theme, and here's another one with a vintage theme. So I'll tell you more about this whole process. Your art charms will also need a jump ring, a split ring, or some wire wrapping to attach them to the jewelry piece. These charms were part of an art charm swap. Everybody who participated made a whole bunch of the same one, sent them to the host, and then she divvied them up between everybody. There's 2 types of art charms. These are mixed media art charms made with a variety of materials, and then there's another style called bead dangles, where it's just beads and more of a vertical drop charm. Sometimes it's nice to have bead dangles in between the larger charms, and they hang nicely. I'll show you which, these are stuck together here. I'll show you which art charm that I created for everybody in the swap. My art charm is made out of polymer clay, and I did a little face of Frida Kahlo and a stamp on the back of it. Thank you to the other people who contributed their other charms. Step number 1 in creating an art charm necklace or art charm jewelry is to create the charms. These were done previously, as I mentioned, so this tutorial will not show how to actually create them. Step number 2 is to plan the arrangement. So looking at these, I noticed that one stands out as laying differently than the others. That's because it's got something 3-dimensional bumpy on the back of it. I am not positive how this will lay in a necklace. I considered putting them on a bracelet because I knew it wouldn't have a problem laying flat in a bracelet. So in step number 2 with planning the arrangement, I'm going to have to make that one because of the bright color and also the 3-dimensionality, is that a word, of it. I'm going to try making that the center. The other option, and when you're planning it out, I would start with what's in the center, would be this one because of its size and the way it catches your eye. So for right now, I'm positioning this one in the center. And then I'm thinking what would balance this one out on the other side. As you're planning, think across from each other what balances. Think about what's not going to be competing with each other. If these were right next to each other, they're pretty similar. And I'll just go around planning an order that might look pleasing.
There are so many fun, colorful mixed media art charms here. Notice bottle caps, collage images, polymer clay, found objects, shrink plastic, quotes, buttons, metal charms or milagros, fabric, and other beaded parts. Art charms usually differ from bead dangles in that they have some sort of a handmade element to them, something that is handcrafted and not just beads strung on a head pin. So as I am arranging these, I'm paying attention to separating similar colors or similar images or similar materials, just so we've got your eye moving throughout the project and don't have anything that looks too similar next to each other. Nice variety of art charms.
So far, this is what I have planned out for the arrangement of this art charm necklace. Step number 3 is to fill in the spaces with some extra beads. Some of this could be done ahead of time if you have a large bead or pre-made charms that you want to add in there, and some of this could be done as you're stringing it onto the necklace itself.
I'm not focusing on placement of really small beads right now. Those will come along as the project comes together. I'm just finding some of the larger beads and the colors where I'd like those pops of colors to go. What color palette do you associate with Frida Kahlo? I picture a bright and lively rainbow with yellow, pink, aqua, lime green, and orange.
Step 4 is to string the charms and the beads onto the beading wire. It's always good practice to cut the beading wire somewhat longer than you think you'll actually use, so you've got room to do the attaching of the clasp at the end or any changes that you might come up with.
You can also see that there's enough beads or enough charms that this could be a double-stranded bracelet. That would be a really fun chunky art charm bracelet. What else could it be? Maybe around a lampshade? That would look cool. Or a wall hanging. It could be a number of lengths of necklace with extra spacer beads between. A lot of different options for a project like this.
Then as I'm stringing these on, I'll start with that center one.
I should also mention that some people do like to use a beading tray to plan out your whole project.
And I don't want it to hang right against the ones next to it, so it's important to have some kind of spacer beads on each side of it.
I end up opting for the same type of long tube bead on each side, the one that I'm putting on right now, but a different color on each side. So the green on one side, and here goes the pink on the other side. It's also important to notice how big of a jump ring or wired loop the charm is attached to, and sometimes you need a larger bead so it doesn't slide through the jump ring or the split ring.
Because of the way that this one is bumpy on the back, I'm gonna stop right now, take a look in the mirror, and see if it actually can hang flat when it's on my neck. As expected, it doesn't hang flat, but it's flat enough. What I didn't expect is that it on its own flipped over this way and it looked really pretty. And so there's the possibility of having it lay with the flowers up. The third possibility is after I finish the whole necklace, if I'm unhappy with how it lays, I can snip that one off and insert something else here. So I'm going to proceed in this manner, holding it up from time to time to see how things hang and trying to balance colors, so I don't want another pink bead right next to that one. Maybe I'll go with the green, or no, the aqua. I'm not doing things completely symmetrical, but for this center point, I will try to use some symmetry on each side of that bead. Then with art charms, you really have to experiment to see how they hang. Since they're unique, each one hangs a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is how close do you want them to each other? If these two hang like this, they're overlapping a little bit. Do I want another bead so they're separated, or do I want them kind of close? That's a little bit close, so I'm going to take this one off and continue with another spacer bead in here.
At this point, I'll set this video to music and speed up the process a little bit, do some time lapse. It's just fun to look at all these pretty colors, textures, and the different designs as they come together. I'll show you at the end how the project looks, and I'll come back and talk a little bit more about it as we're putting on the clasp as well. A couple things to note from the stringing on of the charms and beads is that if I didn't like how a bead looked, I took it off and perhaps moved it to a different place or used a different color. And that if a charm didn't hang right with the right side up, I took that off and put it back with the wire threading through the opposite direction of the jump ring so it would lay correctly face up. Also, a couple of the charms had jump rings that weren't completely closed, so I used that small jewelry pliers to make sure the rings were closed so they wouldn't fall off the necklace while wearing it.
Did you notice that I was counting the charms? Turns out there were an uneven number when I had the one in the center, and so I looked into one of my jewelry supply drawers and I had this little bead dangle charm to even it out so there was something across from each charm. Time for step number 5, which is the clasp. I do have separate standalone tutorials about just putting on a clasp onto jewelry and also how to use the crimp beads or crimp tubes. So if you need just that information at a later time, feel free to look up those videos. I'll be using a lobster clasp and a large jump ring because that's easiest for my fingers. The clasp itself will go, I'm right-handed, so it will go on, as I'm wearing this, the part that I would hold in my right hand.
Now let's talk about how to attach that clasp so the necklace can be worn. I'll start by taking out 2 crimp beads or crimp tubes and setting them aside. I'll find the end of the necklace that will be held in my right hand, and on that beading wire I will string one of those crimp beads or crimp tubes. I'll try pushing it all the way down so it's fairly close to the beads that are on the necklace. Next comes the clasp, in this case the lobster clasp, and then taking the end of that wire, I'm threading it back through the crimp bead towards my opposite hand. I pushed it down as far as I could to the end of the wire, and I made sure that it could dangle loosely. We don't want any clasps that are on there too tight. Using the crimp tool, I first crimp it with the opening that is closest to my hand, the hand that I'm holding the tool. That squeezes the crimp bead into a V. Then I insert it into that tip of the crimp tool so it rounds it out. Again, I've got another video about that if you want to know a little bit more detail. I'm just working to get it really rounded. Sometimes when you do a crimp bead, it can end up flattened, and so I'm turning the crimp tool in different directions to round out that crimp bead. With that said, you can use irregular pliers and just make the crimp bead flat. For this case, for this project, I'm making it round because I'm going to put a crimp cover on top of it. A crimp cover is just a decorative open bead that you put around the crimp so it doesn't look like a crimp. I snipped off the end of the wire, and now I'm going to take out those crimp covers, choose one, there's some different decorations in there, and put it with the open side up in the pliers, like a taco, and I am gently laying down the crimp bead inside of there, working to get the wire out of the way, and then with beading pliers, squeezing that cover shut so it just looks like a regular interesting gold bead, and you don't actually see the crimp, it's housed inside of there. Now the clasp is on and everything is secure. Let's do the other side. On the other end of the necklace, I am repeating the same process. First up is putting the crimp bead on the wire. Next is the jump ring that the clasp will be clasped onto. Then taking the end of the wire back through the crimp bead, crimping it with the crimp tool, and snipping it off with the wire cutters. Lastly, I'm attaching the decorative crimp cover around that crimp bead.
Woohoo! The project is finished. Let's take a look at this gorgeous Frida Kahlo art charm necklace. Before looking at some close-up pictures of the finished Frida Kahlo art charm necklace, let's take a look at how it looks on. So fun, colorful, vibrant, artsy, love it. Great theme, Frida Kahlo art charm necklace. Here's that middle piece that can go in either direction. Now let's look at the individual charms up close. Thanks for spending creative time with me today.